my name's Teresa. I'm the owner of New Forest Sewing Studio in Langley in Hampshire. So every month, as you know from our other videos, we do a sew along just to help with anyone's sewing. So this month for February, we decided to do the True Bias Blair Skirt. So it's a nice button-down skirt with some cargo pockets. It's available in sizes 0 to 18 or 14 to 32, so a good size inclusive range. So as I say, it's got a button down skirt. You could use poppers. It's got some cargo pockets here with flat pocket covers and buttons securing it. No pockets on the back, which sometimes is quite nice. It has a belt loops and it's got a belt pattern as well to make the belt. So it's a really nice pattern, great instructions, and hopefully our sew along will help you through any bits you're not sure about. So the first thing we're going to do is, having cut out all our pieces, done our tailor's tacks to mark our pockets and our pocket placement and the dart ends. Then we just need to interface the pieces. So this pattern's really good. It has separate pieces for your interfacing, okay, to the actual pattern piece. So the interfacing pieces are separate pieces. So the pocket flaps, you've got interfacing piece 11, and it wants you to interface you're going to cut out 2 of the pocket flaps in your outer fabric and then 2 in your lining fabric, okay, which I've just used a cotton here for the lining, and then it wants you to cut out 2 interfacing pieces, piece 11, and then you're going to interface the pocket flap lining, okay, so that's both of those. You'll cut 2 of those. Okay, and it just wants you to interface those, and it clearly shows you in the pictures where it wants you to place it, because the interfacing piece will be smaller than the actual piece. That's just allowing your ½ inch seam allowance around, but that piece, it wants you to put it right towards the top, so around like that. Okay, so that's your pocket flaps. I can put away those interfacing pieces, and also your belt, because I will do the belt as well. So it's got, your belt piece is piece 9, your actual fabric piece is piece 9, okay, but your interfacing piece is piece 11. Put that one up out of the way. So then it just wants you to interface down along that edge, so you leave a gap at that end all the way down the centre, and then just leave a gap at that end. I did have to just join a bit because my interfacing wasn't long enough, but that's fine. Okay, and then just a piece there, so I'll put those to one side. That's the belt, and then it also wants you to interface your inner waistband. So your actual waistband piece, you're going to cut 1 in your main fabric and then 1 in your lining fabric, okay? So this is my lining fabric piece, and then your piece 12, and that just fits along inside, giving your ½ inch seam allowance all around the edge there. So you're going to fuse that in place there. Let's leave that like that. I'm going to put that into piece out of the way. Move that up out of the way over there. And then the next piece it wants you to do is your button bands. So it'll want you to cut 2 of pieces 4. Okay, so they are like that. Okay, so 2 of those from your main fabric, and then your interface piece for your button bands is piece 10. Okay, so you've got 1 of those, and then you're just going to fuse it. So the easiest way to do this is your in your main fabric, your button band is just fold that in half and press that in half, and then when you unfold it, you can see where that center line is, and then you're going to place your interfaced piece of interfacing along that center line, and you want it on the half where you've got your notches. So one of your half pieces has got notches on, which I can't now find. Oh, there we are. There we go. So has notches on. So you want to put that, your interface piece, onto that side. All right, and you're going to do that with both pieces. All right, so you should end up with a mirror image, one of the other. Okay, like so. So I'm going to fold those up, put those to one side as well. Over there. Out of the way. Okay, so then with all our pieces interfaced, now the next bit to do is to do the darts on the skirt. So you want the front and the back of the skirt. We have two fronts and the one back cut on the fold. So piece 2 is cut on the fold. Okay, so when you fold it out, you've got one whole piece for your back. And these are my tailor's tacks. They're marked in for my dart placement. And then I've just notched the top of the darts. So I just notched the top of the darts on the pattern there, and then put a tailor's tack just in the point of my dart. Tailor's tack in the point of my dart there, and then put a couple of little snips into the fabric at the top there to mark my dart. Do exactly the same thing for the front dart. Okay, so your front piece, you'll have two pieces. Okay, so one a mirror image of the other, and I have marked my dart, the point of my dart, notched at the top, and also marked in a couple of tailor's tacks here and here for the size markings for my pocket placement. Okay, you can with a tailor's chalk or carbon paper draw a line across, but I find it's fine just to mark a little tailor's tack on each end, and then they won't rub off when I'm working on it. So that's those pieces. So that's the skirts, fronts and backs. Let's put the fronts to one side for a minute. We'll do the back first. So with your wrong side, do exactly the same thing with the other one, and then we'll draw the dart lines in where you're going to sew. So align the notch at the top. Pinch where your, so align that notches at the top, pinch where the tailor's tack is, put a pin in there. Sit it nice and flat. A couple of pins in there. Okay, and then we're going to mark our dart line in. So we're going to mark it from the notch at the top, okay, where we marked that notch for our dart legs, down to the tailor's tack to the point of the dart there. Okay, so we're just going to make sure I can see where I'm going. Okay, and just mark that in along there. All right, so I'm going to do the same with this one, and then we'll do the same on the front skirts as well. Okay, so that's those drawn in. That over there, and then the front ones. So dart this together. Point of your dart. Just make sure it's sat nice and flat along there. Just hold the fabric together with another dart in between, and then just draw from your dart leg at the top there down to the bottom. Okay, so we're going to go and sew all 4 of those. Okay, so then to press out your darts, it's best usually to press them flat like that. Okay, so do that on both of your darts, and we're going to be pressing them towards the centre back and the centre front. So I've done the fronts, so this is the back. Okay, so then we're going to press them towards the centre back that way. Make sure it's nice and well pressed to the tip there. And then this one is going to go that way. And then it's worth just giving them a press from the other side. So let's take my tailor's tack out of that one. So sometimes it can be useful to use a tailor's ham because it's a slightly curved, you've created a curve with that dart. And you can just press that in place. And the same with the other one. There we go. Okay, so that's the darts pressed out there. Okay, so next we're going to do the pocket. Okay, so next is the pocket piece. Okay, so we're going to get piece 6, which is the main part of our pocket and our main fabric. We'll have marked the notches at the top and the notches at the bottom, and I'll put some tailor's tacks in, or you could mark with a heat erasable pen where these dots are here, because you're going to need those to see how far to align it and see how far to sew down to. So we're going to place that right sides together, okay, and you're going to line up those notches at the top and at the bottom of your fabric. So that's that one there, and then the ones at the bottom there, just align those. This side. And then we're going to line up these marks where the dots are, where these dots are on your pattern. So from right to left there, and put one there. Now I'm going to do the same thing this side, so there, through to there. Okay, now I've got that pinned in place where that is. I can take those tailor's tacks out if I can. I don't stitch them all in, otherwise they're just a bit, you can leave them in and get them out later, but they're just easiest to take out before if you can. See, that one's already caught in a pin. So what I need to do is to stitch from there up to here and from there down to there. So I'll draw that in so you can see. You could draw it in to stitch along if that makes it easier for you as well. So I'm going to stitch from there to there, and from that one to that one. So we are going to stitch from bottom there up to there, back stitch in here, and then back stitch there, stitch to the end there. I'm going to do that on both those pieces, and then we're going to press that seam open, which I'll show you, and then put the lining on the back. Okay, so it does actually on the instructions ask you to stitch down, back stitch there, stitch down to your first dot mark where you've marked, and then back stitch, and then lengthen your stitch to a basting stitch, stitch down to here to the next dot, back to a normal stitch, back stitch, and then down to the end. I haven't done that on mine. It's a nice stable fabric, so I didn't feel I need it, but on other when I've sewed it in another different type of fabric before, I have, on a slightly lighter weight, I have base stitched that in place. So it depends on your fabric really. It's just to hold it nice and keep it where nice and aligned while you press this bit. So once you press that in place flat, then you want to turn it upside down like that, and you want this, your pressed edge there, to align with the center where your stitching is. So roughly in the centre there, and then just press that in place along there. I think that's roughly in the centre. Turn it over to that way. Good press. Okay, so next we're going to do the lining. So I've got rid of my notches now. Bear with me. Got notches in one and not in the other. So you've got to centre a notch along the top and the bottom of your lining piece, which I've just lost with mine. That's that one because I trimmed it down. So yeah, so I've got notches in there. A notch slightly more, so I don't remove them. Okay, so then I prefer just to take just a fraction off mine, so just a tiny little edge, about an 1/8 of an inch, if that really, just around all the edges, just so that it just helps. I find it's not quite enough, mine's not quite enough to help it, those edges roll underneath, so you don't see them on the actual pocket edge when you turned it out. So it literally is just a slither. Okay, taking it off that edge. Ooh, as if I did it in view, wouldn't it? Lost where I've got to now. Right, that one, I think. And then that one up at the top. So just about an 1/8 of an inch, if that, just around all those 4 edges. Okay, just a fraction. And then I find it helps the edge of the pocket turn under, so that you don't get it showing on the right side. So where did those notches go? So you've got a notch at the top of your pattern piece and a notch at the bottom, piece 7 of your lining, and you're going to line the notch up with that centre front and pin it to that edge there. I'm going to do the same with the bottom edge. Now, because I've trimmed mine down slightly, I'm just going to need to pull it a little bit taut so that it lines up. The lining will be a little bit more taut, but then that will help it just naturally fold under to the wrong side. Often do that sort of thing with a collar, things like that as well, to help it. See what I mean? So it's just slightly out, just by a fraction there. So you just pull that over to the edge to align. Do this end as well first, so that in some way, otherwise I'm happily sewing round and then I sew up the gap. So I'm like, oh. So you can do it in all sorts of ways, but I'm just going to draw a line there and a line there so that I know I'm going to leave that gap there. Okay, to turn it out. So I'm going to stitch from here all the way around and back to there, back stitching at these ends here, and then I'll show you how we'll trim the corners off and then turn it out to the right side. colour, is it? Pin. It doesn't come out. Okay, so I've stitched around there, okay, basted along the top edge, which it doesn't tell you to do, but I prefer to do that to keep those edges together to attach it later. It's much easier. You need to measure where your buttonhole is going to go. You can use your pattern piece where it's got it marked on. I prefer to measure about a centre up from that centre line, put a pin in, and then fold it over like that, so that then you can see my pin's in the centre there. You can see that you've got that in the centre of your piece. Okay, so I'm going to go and stitch both of those. And I'm going to use the prim like jeans buttons here. I think they'll look quite nice, so I'm going to use those. I'll stitch those buttonholes, and then we'll carry on tomorrow with some of the skirt. Okay. Okay, so we've stitched our pockets around and done the buttonhole. Okay, and I've opened up that buttonhole. All right, already. So next we want to attach it to the skirt pieces. So I've just marked the centre, just folded it in half and found the centre, marked that with a pen line there so you can see of each of the pocket pieces, and then that's easier to line up with the centre of your pocket piece here. Now we need to stitch them at 1/2 inch. This edge needs to be placed 1/2 inch above your pocket there, so I'm just gonna measure that in. Actually, let's do the centre first. So 1/2 inch. Pin that in place. Nice long pins are helpful with this when you've got a heavier fabric. And that one in there. And then that one there. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same with the other one. All right, and then we're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch along the edge there. All right, and then we're going to fold it over, press it, and stitch 1/4 inch. So I'll show you. I'll do this one first. I'll stitch it 1/8 of an inch first, and then show you what we've done there. Okay. Okay, so that's our pocket. Excuse my croaky throat. So that's our pocket sewn on there. So just about 1/8 of an inch there, and then just fold it over like that. Give it a press, and then top stitch along there, like I have done on that one there. Okay. Way. So on that one there, just top stitch along the top there, about 1/4 inch once that's folded down, and then that should all be concealed inside there. I have got a few straggly ends, so when it's like this, it's best if you trim off any of those straggly ends so that they're not poking through. So I just need to trim some of those off there just to neaten that up. A couple will pull out, but I've got a couple there I just need to trim up. Yeah, so I'll sort that out. And then it's attaching the fronts to the back. So you've got your back piece here with your darts sewn in. So then we're just going to attach that down the side seams here. Matching your notches. So I've marked my notches with a chalk. So I've already overlocked my edges because it wants you to stitch this and then press your seams open. So I prefer to overlock it and neaten my seams before I sew it together. You can do it afterwards. And this is a heavier, this is a 12 ounce twill, so I just wanted to make sure I could press the seams open. So there's another notch here to join together there. So I'll just, as I say, I've marked it with chalk, so I'm going to make sure those line up there. And then there's another one down the bottom here. Make sure those line up there. So match your notches up first, and then at the top and the bottom of the skirt as well, just to make sure that's all lined up, and then you can sort of put a couple of pins in between as you feel you need it. So on there, on there. It's probably okay. There. Okay, so then we're going to stitch that seam at 1/2 inch, do exactly the same for the other side, but I'm just going to top stitch this pocket down first. Press the seams open. Now if you haven't, I've made this skirt before, so I'm quite happy with the fit, but if you haven't made it before and you wanted to check the fit, then you can just baste those side seams and then check the fit before you stitch them. Before, you can always adjust it then on your side seams, or you could even, you know, adjust the dart slightly if you wanted to get that fit right. So yeah, I would do that, but as I say, I've made it before, so I'm happy with the fit. So I'm going to stitch that as normal, 1/2 inch seam allowance, exactly the same thing on the other side, and then we are going to turn up the hems before you do the we stitch the hem before you do the front band. So again, you probably need to decide what length you want it before you're going to do that front band. Okay, and we'll talk about more about that in a minute. Okay, so I've stitched those side seams, okay, and I've pressed them open. As I say, I had neatened the edges before. If you haven't done before, then just neaten your edges now. You could, depending on the weight of your fabric, you could overlock them together, press them towards the back. But yeah, I preferred just, it's a 12 ounce twill, so I just preferred to press them open. And next it's to do the hem. So it says to press under, check your length as well. So if you do want to adjust any, turn up your hem and check your length, pin up your hem and check your length. If you then want to take any off, you'll also need to take that amount off your button band, but when you place it on, but you'll see that when you place it on, so I wouldn't worry too much about that till you come to fit it. But if you've reduced your length of your hem on your skirt, then you will have more overlapping on your button band, so that's expected. So it says to fold it under 1/2 inch and then turn it up 1.5 inches. Okay, but I as I say, it is a thicker weight fabric, so I prefer to overlock, neaten my edges, and then I'm going to turn it up just once by 2 inches and then stitch along this overlocked edge, measuring up 2 inches for me all the way along here. As I say, if you've done it 1/2 inch and then 1.5 inches, then that's what you'll be doing. But I'm going to pin it, so pin it at the side seams, measure it up at the side seams, and then measure it up at the end. I can't see what I'm doing, can I? Right. So measure it up at the side seam there and measure it up at the end there, and then just check that you're level in between. Pin that in place. And then I'm just going to give it a press, and then we'll top stitch along there. Now to top stitch along there, I will probably just tack along the edge here. Excuse me. I will tack along the edge here and then use that as a guide to stitch along. If you have a 2 inch seam allowance thing on your machine, then you could do that, or you can use tape or all sorts of things. But because I want to stitch it from the wrong side, from the right side rather, I just want to make sure I'm catching in that edge. So So I'll show you how I do that. Oops, let's just get this right first. There we go. So I'm just going to give that a quick press, and then I'll show you how I tack that. Okay. So then to tack it, I'm just going to tack along she said if she can get all the tacking thread untangled. Sometimes, right. Should put some. It's always the way when you do it. I want to do it on camera. Gets all twiddled up. Right, so then I'm just going to run a long tacking stitch. Nice long stitches is fine. Even distance from the edge of that fabric there. You could bind the hem, do it this way if you wanted to. I'm quite happy with the overlock. I've got overlocked seams here, so I'm quite happy with this. It doesn't overly fray, this fabric, but it's still nice to neaten your seam allowances. Make it a nicer finish. But you could bind the seams, very much so, wouldn't it? Make a really nice high-end finish. Alternatively, if you wanted to line your skirt, then you could make this fabric's actually, because of the backing on it, it's quite nice on you know, worn with tights and things, it doesn't catch. But if you want to wear it with thick tights, you might want to line it. If you wanted to line it, then you would just make your back piece and two side panel pieces, stitch them together, and at this point you would hem it, and then, or I would hem it and then attach it, baste it to the side seams and along the top, the waistband, along where the waistband's going to go. So if you basted that in place now, then when you put your button band on and everything, then that will all be, and your waistband on, and that will all be attached. So that's definitely feasible to do. So I'm going to tack this, carry on tacking this along here. Okay, and we can take the pins out. And then I'm going to top stitch along there, and then we're going to put the button band on. Okay. Okay, so I've stitched along the hem. So all I did was just stitch slightly inside those tacking stitches, so I catch the hem underneath. And then you can just pull those tacking stitches out. They come out nice and easy. Okay, so that's the hem. So next we want to do the button band. So down both sides. The pattern piece just disappeared. So we want to, you've got your button band, and then you've interfaced along the lining up the center of that piece, okay, along the notched edge, which we did earlier, and then you want to fold it in half, okay, press it in half, and then the uninterfaced side, unnotched edge, you want to press over your seam allowance 1/2 inch. All right, press that over, and then you want to attach your button band to the wrong side. So you want the right side of your button band piece to the wrong side of your skirt. Okay, so that's the wrong side of your skirt. So the right side of your button band to the wrong side of your skirt. Now you have some notches. You've got a notch there to join up. Let's join got a notch at the top here, join up with that one. Oops, got that quite lined up. Right, hang on. That's it, there. That will line up with there. And then your top will line up with your waistband edge, will line up at the top there. Trying to pin it on back to front how I would normally pin it. It was odd, didn't it, trying to do it on camera sometimes so you can see. Not being able to see. Okay, so now you will have some overlap at the bottom. And that is that you need to have that overlap at the bottom so that you can make your hem of your bottom of your button band, which I'll show you in a minute. So you will need that. You will need to have some overhanging the end, ideally at least ½ inch overhanging at the bottom there. Okay, get that on there. Okay, so we're going to stitch that at ½ inch seam allowance, okay, and then I'm going to press the seam towards the button band, and then you encase that bit round over the top. So I'll show you that in a moment. I'll go and stitch these seams ½ inch. Okay, so we've stitched that seam, okay, and then I've trimmed the seam allowance down a bit just to reduce the bulk. So I've stitched that at ½ inch down there, and then I've just trimmed back half the sort of width of the button band seam allowance there, just to try and reduce some bulk. Press the seam towards the button band, okay, so that's all gets pressed, that seam gets pressed towards the button band, and then that will fold over like that, and then in a minute we're going to top stitch down that front edge to secure that in place. But before we do that, we just need to sort out the hem bit at the bottom here. So this is at the bottom of your button band, so we need to sort out this piece here. So you're going to turn it wrong sides out, keeping those edges folded. Line that up. I'll show you when I pinned it. Ooh. There we go. Keep it nice and straight. That's it. Okay, so you're going to fold it back like that. Okay, so that was your waistband. So I've just folded it back on itself. Okay, and then we're going to stitch across there, ½ inch across there. Okay, so level with your hem, you're going to stitch across there, and then we'll trim this seam at the bottom and turn it out. Then we can stitch the front button band down. So we'll stitch that first. Okay. Okay, so we've stitched that across there, across the bottom there. So all we're going to do now is just trim that corner there, and then trim across, and I'm just going to trim this one down slightly more. Okay, just like that, and then we can turn it through. To get a point turner, just to get that point pressed out. Get into that corner at the moment. Missed a corner. Okay, so I'll get that pressed out nicely. So I'm going to go and press that, okay, all over to that side, and then we're going to pin it like we have done this one. Okay, so I'm going to press that over, pin it, like I've done along, so that's folded over onto there and then pinned that in place. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you how we'll top stitch down this side. We just need to make sure as we top stitch that we keep this edge just covered over that edge of stitching that we've done previously. So that edge of stitching which stitched the seam, we just need to check that that covers over the edge there as we stitch it down. So I'll show that. Okay, so we're going to top stitch down this side. So this is the edge we've got here that we've folded over, so we just need to make sure it folds over that stitch line there. I'm just going to stitch a couple back stitch at the top, so that will be within your waistband. That's okay. So just making sure that that's folding over the sure that's just that edge is folded over. It's a good idea to put your pins in to keep this, because to prevent it sort of, I'm going to make sure that it's not travelling along, so that you get a sort of wrinkled edge there. Oh, that's it, coming over away from there. So bring that over. Get a slight pucker there. Fold that in. Over a bit. Away from the edge a bit. Oh dear. That's okay. I'll probably be better with a walking foot actually for this. It's wanting to sort of travel a bit. Well, I've got several layers. Depends on the thickness of your fabric. I did it with an 8-ounce twill and it no problem, but this is wanting to travel a bit. Yeah, that'll press out fine. So yeah, what you're making sure is that this bit doesn't sort of start wrinkling up as you're stitching along. But yeah, that's that top stitched in place, and then I'm going to do exactly this. I'm just going to stitch down this centre front, this other edge of your button band along here. Much easier to do because you're not trying to keep it all attached. You just want to make sure it's sat nice and flat as you stitch along. That's both sides of the button band stitched. So next we're going to do the belt loops. So I'm just going to press those and then we'll show you. We've got our the right angle. So we've got our belt loop piece. I've overlocked down one long edge, and then I've the unoverlocked edge. Get it in focus. Really weird. The unoverlocked, unneatened edge, I've pressed under 1/4 inch and then pressed over the overlocked edge on top of that, all right, to make the belt loops. And then we're going to stitch down both sides of that on the top side, on the right side of the fabric. So it says about 1/16 of an inch. So I'm just going to guide it so that we're going to catch that one underneath, hopefully. I'm going to back stitch because they're a belt loop. I probably am a bit more than 1/16 of an inch, but I want to make sure I catch that underneath edge. So about 1/8 of an inch. Edge. Right. Let's keep going then. We make 6 belt loops with this. And the length they are. It's 3.5 inches, but I'll check that. And then down the same sort of distance down the other side. The other side, so that's fairly even. Oops, down along there. Okay, so I'm going to give that a press and then we'll cut it into the 6 pieces. I think it's 3.5 inches each, but I'll confirm that. Okay. So we've got our belt loops, so we've done them and I've cut them into 6 3.5 inch. Sorry, there's our belt loops. I've cut them into 6 3.5 inch pieces. Okay, and then it wants you to place them along. Oops, got that crinkled up. Place them along the top of your waistband, matching up the notches at the top. And I'll show you. So along like this. So first of all, it wants you to fold up. So wrong sides together. fold up 1/2 inch at the bottom and just give that a press. Okay, and then it wants you to line up your, so right sides together, the right side of your belt loop with the right side of your fabric of your waistband lining. Okay, so just the waistband lining piece at the moment, and then you've got 6 notches along the top of the waistband. So there's notches for the top of the waistband and the bottom of the waistband. You should have 6 notches at the top, which line up well where those belt loops are going to go. So we're just going to baste those in place. Okay, so I'll probably do baste them in place at about about 1 centimetre seam allowance, 3/8 of an inch, and then we're going to press the edge of the outer waistband up and attach that to here. So I'll baste these in place first. Okay, so we've basted those in place. It's a bit crooked, that one. That's all right. Yep. Okay, so we basted those in place along the top there, and then our outside waistband piece, it wants you to, the edge, the lower edge that you're going to attach to the actual waistband, it wants you to press up 3/8 of an inch along that edge. So I often prefer to just do a stitch line at 3/8 of an inch on your sewing machine. That gives you a good guide as to where to press that up to. And then you're going to join these 2 waistbands together. So we are going to join them together along the top there. So just along the top at the moment, because then we're going to understitch it along that top edge. So we're just going to pin that in place. So your notches will line up with where you've put your belt loops. Line those up there, there and there. So your notches all join up on the top there. Oops. That thread. Okay, so I'm just going to put a couple of pins in between. Just to hold those edges together evenly. So we're going to stitch along that 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we are going to press the seam allowance towards the lining and then understitch. So I'll show you when we do that. So we're going to stitch this at 1/2 inch seam allowance first of all, okay, press it up towards the lining, and then I'll show you how we understitch. Okay, so now we're going to understitch. Get my chair. So we just want to understitch just to this side, so just to this side of your seam, so on the lining side. So I've got the seam all pressed towards that side. I did grade the seam slightly, so I've trimmed down my outer waistband edge, being the thicker edge, pressed it all towards the lining side, and now we're just going to understitch. So we're just stitching along this side here. Not to get my head in the way. those lumps where you've got those belt loops. So this is just so that when the waistband's folded, it just helps keep that lining over to the wrong side. Especially if you've used a contrast lining like I have. But it does say in the instructions to understitch, which is good. Gives a nice finish. Do this from a distance away so I don't get my head in the way of the camera, which hopefully it's not. No. Okay, so that's just understitched it like that along. Okay, so that then when we turn it over like that, that naturally just gets pulled towards the underside of the waistband. Okay, so now we're going to go and fix the waistband to the skirt. Okay, so that's our waistband piece. So now we're going to attach that to the skirt. Okay, so we want to attach it to the wrong side. Around that way. So we're going to attach the wrong side, the right side of our lining piece of our waistband to the wrong side of your skirt. Okay, so you've got a notch there that joins up with your dart. That's the centre back. It's a notch there that joins up with the dart. There's the centre back there. A couple in between. So that's all that pinned in place. So we're going to stitch that 1/2 inch seam allowance, then we're going to grade the seam and press it up towards the waistband, and then we're going to stitch these ends in place and then turn it all out over to the right side. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this first. Okay, so that's the that seam, the waistband stitched on there. Okay, and then I've pressed the seam allowance up towards the waistband. Okay, so that's looking like that from that side. So it's all pressed up towards the waistband. This is the right side of the skirt. So next it wants you to do the ends before we fold all that over. Excuse me, I've got a cough. So before we fold that over, it just wants us to stitch these ends. So you're going to fold this end. We're going to fold. This is what we've got at the moment. We're going to fold that back towards there. So keep those edges folded. Let's see what we've got there. And then we're going to pin that in place. Those edges folded back there. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to stitch from here, from this bit here. I'm going to stitch from here up to the top there. Okay, so just along there. So it should be about 1/2 inch. You can always draw it in if that's easier to see where you are. It should be about 1/2 inch. You could always draw that in. So keeping it in line, you're trying to keep it in line with the seam that you've got there. We're going to be stitching along there. Okay, so we're going to do the same on the other side, and then we'll turn it out and fold this waistband over to top stitch in place. Okay, so I've just trimmed the corner. Okay, trimmed the corner there. Okay, to where I stitched there. So I've just trimmed the corner off, trimmed the seam allowance down, graded it slightly, so trimmed that one slightly less, and then you just want to turn it out to the right way, and you'll probably need just a point turner just to get into that corner. Just point that out. Sometimes it takes a bit of wiggling and fidgeting. Giving it a gentle bit of pressure just to push that corner out. Okay, so that's a bit more square. So I'm going to give that all a press, and then we're going to pin that in place and top stitch around. Okay. So we've pressed all that over to the right side, and now we're just going to just pin that in place along there. So you're just trying to make sure you've got your lining piece folded over to the wrong side so that none of that's visible, but that your seam allowance there is just covering your stitching in your waistline seam. Put one in the end there just to keep that corner in nicely, like so. Particularly if you've got a heavier, you know, denim, or this is like 12-ounce weight twill, then it makes it a bit easier to make sure we've got that lining piece tucked in at the end there. Okay. That's weird. Poking out. Okay, we're going to stitch all the way around there. So I'm going to start in the centre back. Do they recommend you do that? Turn the waistband over. Yep, they do. So starting at the centre back, stitch all the way around, pivoting at those corners, all the way around, pivoting at the corners again, and back to the centre back. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then it's turning these belt loops under and stitching those down, and making the belt, and then doing the rest of the buttonholes and the buttons. Okay, so I'll stitch around here first. So that's our waistband top stitched all the way around. Okay, so we've top stitched all the way around there, and next we need to fold these belt loops down. So at the moment they're like that, so we just literally want to fold that over so that it sits flush with the top, and then pin that in place. A bit difficult to pin because they're quite chunky, right? And that last one there, so just fold that down, try and keep it straight, and then grab a pin, and then pin that in place, and then we're just going to go along and just stitch back and forth along this lower edge, so along here. Okay, what I'm going to do actually is just fold them up so that I don't want them too wide, so that edge, yeah, like that. So I'm going to fold it so that the end, this end of my belt loop sits against the end of the edge of my waistband there, like so. All right, so I'm going to go and do that with all of those to make sure they're all nice and even. And so you're just going to stitch. I'm going to use my top stitching thread, and I'm just going to stitch back and forth sort of 3 times or so there, just to stitch those. It doesn't ask you to do the top, and that's fine. I think a belt sits better flush along the waistband if it's not top stitched at the top. And then tomorrow we'll put all the buttons on and do the belt, make the belt up. Okay, so that's the skirt completed so far. That's the belt loop sewn on. That's completed so far, and we've just got to do the rest of the buttonholes down the front and the buttons and make the belt. So it does say in the pattern to do the buttonholes and buttons next, but I'm going to swap and do the belt first. So you just need a belt buckle like this. Just to, it doesn't suggest you put rivets and that in for a buckle, for an actual buckle one. With the post, but just to tie through one like this, which I did on my other skirt and works really well. So it just wants you to get your main piece, piece 9, which is your belt. You'll have interfaced down the middle there, okay, and then it just wants you to fold it right sides together. And then it suggests you just stitch down the length, just the length here. But I do stitch along the end. So it suggests you stitch down this whole side along the length of it, and then turn it out and then fold those ends in, the short end in, and stitch it like that. But I prefer to do it all in one and trim the corners and turn it out. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're just folding it all the way down one long edge. Let's just flip that out of the way a minute. There we go. So we're just folding it down all along one edge. And we're going to stitch along there. I think it's 1/2 inch seam allowance the same. Yeah. So we're just going to stitch that, trim the seam allowances, and then turn it out. So I'll show you how I turn it out. I also find it easier to turn out, particularly a long tube. I find it easier to turn out if you've got one end to press against. So yeah, just my preference to do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to stitch across one end at the bottom, 1/2 inch seam allowance across one end, and then all the way down one side. But it does say in the instructions just all the way down one side, and then once you've turned it in the right way, to turn those ends under. But I prefer to do it this way. Okay, so I'll show you when I've done that. Trim the seam allowance, turn it in the right way, and then we'll attach it to the buckle. Okay, so that's the that's stitched along, and then I've trimmed down my seam allowance, graded the seams just so that I've got one slightly less than the other, and this corner I've trimmed this corner off, trimmed that corner down, graded that seam. And then I find that if you give it a press and press sort of like the seams open, that it'll just make the edges easier when you're folding it out. So the first thing to do is to get it started at one end, which on a thicker fabric can be a bit of a challenge, but once you get it started, and turned in, be the fiddles to start with, but once you get it started, it's fine. Slightly thicker twill than I've used before, but sure it'll work. If you had a really thicker fabric, you could leave a gap in the middle. You can always use the belt with other things, so that's nice. Thing is, don't get it too scrunched up at the end, otherwise it just will not unfold. If you've got anything longer, like a knitting needle or something like that, then sometimes they can help. My turning tool's probably not quite long enough. I'm going to persist with it. Getting there. That's the problem, when you get it too scrunched up one end, it makes it difficult. You're nearly there now. So with your stick, I probably need the pointed end rather than that end. I use it, so when I threadle it first through, just because of pressure on the end, I try to use the flat end, but then you just turn it round and you can use that pointed end just to get those corners pointed out. Just shuffle it along. Looks better once that one done. The other side. A gentle bit of pressure till you've got that corner as good as you think you're going to get it. Let's wiggle that out at the end. Okay, so that's the tube pressed out. So now I'm going to just give that a press with the iron all the way along, okay, to flatten that out. And then it does say to turn under through your loop, is to turn it under and then press this edge under like so, but that's going to make it ever so bulky here. Okay, so I'm gonna once I've ironed that, I'm just going to overlock those edges so I can just fold that flat like that, okay, through the buckle. So I think that'll be much better. So I'm just going to give that a good press and overlock those ends, then we'll threadle it through the buckle and stitch that down. Okay, so that's the belt turned in the right way, and then I've overlocked the end, and then it also wants you to top stitch around, so down one end, across the bottom, and then up the other side. Okay, so I've done that, and then next we're going to put it through our loop. So we're going to go up one side and then down the other, and then you should have with about a 2-inch fold, so that'll be roughly there. So it says to do a 1/4 inch, turn it under, and then another 2 inches and fold it. But I'm just doing the 2 inch fold there. Okay, and then I'm going to top stitch along there. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then we'll do the buttonholes. Okay, so that's the belt, the buckle sewn on. So then you would just thread that up down through there, and then that is your belt buckle done there. Okay, next we are going to do the buttonholes along the skirt and put the buttons on. So there is a piece. So there's a different piece for each length of skirt that you want to do. So this is the one for the for this one. I might not put one there. I might just go down to there, I think. So I'm just going to mark those in place. So the one at the top, as you can see on the details here, the one at the top goes sideways and then the rest go down vertically. So the top one goes horizontally and then the rest go down vertically. That's right over left, yeah. So I'm going to mark the start. So my machine does a buttonhole and then stitches it backwards. So I'm going to mark the start of my buttonhole there. I just usually put a pin in. You can do it with a marker pen or something if you wanted to, but I tend to just use a pin. Usually a longer pin, that's it. Just get the rough position of those marked, and then we'll check to make sure that they're the right distance from the edge in a minute. Okay, and I'm not going to put one at the bottom now, I'm just going to do them down to there, I think. So then with those in place, I just carefully take my pattern piece off. Use the top one in a minute. And we're just going to check that that's the right distance. 2, and that's roughly in the middle there. Yep. There. Just making sure they're all central along your button band. I think that's fine. That one. Okay, So then I'm going to stitch my buttonhole. So they're going to stitch back this way. So I'm going to start there and it'll stitch backwards on all of those, and then this one will go horizontally. So I'll do those and then we'll put the buttons on. So having marked the area with a pin, I thought I'd just show you how I stitch my buttonholes. And how I position it. So I've got the pin marked there, and I want the start of my buttonhole to where I first put the pin in there. Okay, so I'm just going to line that up underneath and then position my needle at the start of where that pin went in. Lift the foot. Oops, she says, lift the foot and pull the pin out. Scissors, hook that underneath. There we go. Pull the pin out and then lower the foot down. And then I like to have one hand here to steer the, make sure you're keeping the where you're going to stitch your buttonhole to keep it straight. I tend to hold the back, my other hand at the back here, just on the end, just on the fabric, just to make sure that the buttonhole is not going to stop at any point, particularly on a heavier weight fabric. That's my buttonhole. All right, so that's all of those sewn on. We'll open up those buttonholes now, and then we'll put the buttons on in place, the jeans buttons. Okay, so I'm just opening out my buttonholes. So I prefer to use a buttonhole chisel. So you're just going to line that up. Do it the other way around so you can see easier. Just push down onto it just so that it cuts through your fabric just in the centre of your buttonhole. Oops, there. Right. And then I just prefer to use some fray check. There we go. Okay, so done that with all the buttonholes, and then it's just positioning the buttons now. So we'll do the pocket one here first. Let's move that out of the way. Along with that, that way actually. Right, so we'll do this pocket one first. So with it sat nice and flat, just with a marker, you just mark through the centre of that buttonhole there. Okay, so just marking through the centre of that buttonhole. Should roughly line up along that line there. And then with a tailor's awl or something, you just want to pierce through. So just your pocket piece, not through the back of the skirt. All right, so just, and then I would just go from the other way where your hook's gonna, where your thing's gonna pass up through. And then you get your attachments for your, with your prim buttons, prim jeans buttons. So put the little nail bit in that one. And then the top bit is for this one. Okay, now I like to try and make sure mine are sort of, they're a pattern on them. So I like to try and make sure they are facing up the right way if I can. So I'm going to take that one out. put that one in. Make sure that little nail bit is pressed up through the hole there, and then I can line this up so that it's sort of up the right way. She says. Make sure that's positioned in there. That's it, that seems to be right, and then just give it a squeeze. Just make sure you haven't got any of your skirt pocket caught up in, so that that's on there nicely, and then we can secure that one there. Oops, thread there. Okay, that's that one there. Okay, so then we're going to do the rest of the skirt front. So you want to fold it so that it's together. So your button band should overlap along those top stitched edges. So your button band should align down the front. So that edge align with that edge. The button band should align this edge with that edge there. Okay. So I'm going to mark where that one should go. There. Okay. And then I'm going to put that one in first, I think, and then I'm going to mark the rest of them. So this one, the one at the top here, wants to go at the end of that buttonhole, because obviously it will be pulled this way, so that will be where the button will want to sit. These should be marked roughly in the centre, so the centre of each of those. Okay, so I'm going to do that all the way around. Put those buttons on there, and then I'll show you when that's done. Okay, so that's the skirt completed. Oh, let's get rid of that thread at the end. So that's the skirt completed with our cargo pockets on the front. Yeah, so that's the Blair skirt. So it's a really nice pattern. Nice to have the option of a belt. And that's the back. So there's no pockets on the back. So it's a nice clean finish at the back. Get my threads off. Yeah. So very much like that pattern. You can make it in lots of different white fabrics. I've made it in a white denim for the summer, and I've made it in a navy twill, 8-ounce twill, in the shorter length. But I decided to keep this length. Oh, I just need to trim a couple more threads off there. I'll do that. Yeah, that's all finished.